O mundo recebe, atônito e apreensivo, o anúncio da doutrina que vai nortear a política externa americana daqui para frente. Uma doutrina radical que privilegia o domínio militar e ataques preventivos para destruir os inimigos atuais e futuros, com o objetivo declarado: manter para sempre a supremacia americana. A doutrina Bush não chega a ser uma surpresa. O Sem Fronteiras de hoje busca entender as origens desse pensamento, que nuances estão contidas nele e o que se pode esperar do futuro sob o signo da única hiperpotência. Por trás dos planos para invadir o Iraque, os Estados Unidos têm uma nova estratégia global. No mesmo dia em que o Pentágono entregou à Casa Branca os planos finais para a invasão, a Casa Branca enviou ao Congresso o documento que detalha a doutrina Bush, a nova estratégia de segurança nacional dos Estados Unidos. Pela primeira vez, os Estados Unidos adotam oficialmente a política de atacar preventivamente seus inimigos em potencial. Segundo o jornal The New York Times, o documento poderia ter sido escrito por um imperador romano ou por Napoleão Bonaparte. Essa nova doutrina fere a Carta da ONU, que só permite o uso da força em resposta a uma clara e imediata ameaça de agressão. Mas a doutrina Bush vai mais longe. Afirma, também pela primeira vez, que os Estados Unidos não vão permitir que nenhuma outra potência venha competir com a supremacia militar americana. Nossas forças, diz o texto, serão fortes o suficiente para dissuadir adversários em potencial de buscarem um reforço militar, na esperança de superarem ou atingirem o poder dos Estados Unidos. Os ataques terroristas de 11 de setembro, segundo o documento, deram aos Estados Unidos uma oportunidade histórica. Nesse novo mundo pós-11 de setembro, afirma a doutrina Bush, o único caminho para a segurança é o caminho da ação. E os Estados Unidos estão decididos a agir sozinhos, se for preciso. No exercício da nossa liderança, afirma o documento, respeitaremos os valores e interesses dos nossos amigos e parceiros, mas estaremos preparados para agir sozinhos quando nossos interesses exigirem. Bush também inclui em sua estratégia o combate ao narcotráfico, que ameaça a segurança dos Estados Unidos. No caso da Colômbia, isso inclui o combate aos grupos terroristas e extremistas de direita e de esquerda e ao narcotráfico que financia esses grupos. O Brasil é citado no documento como um dos países com os quais os Estados Unidos têm uma coalizão, por compartilharem das mesmas prioridades. A doutrina Bush também inclui a ajuda econômica aos países que abrirem seus mercados e conta para isso com o apoio do Fundo Monetário Internacional. O documento inclui na estratégia global dos Estados Unidos o aumento da livre circulação de capitais nos mercados emergentes e a abertura de todas as sociedades ao comércio e ao investimento. A doutrina Bush é a cristalização do novo pensamento estratégico da elite dominante nos Estados Unidos, um país que essa própria elite já descreve como a hiperpotência, um pensamento que vem evoluindo desde o fim da Guerra Fria. Num debate recente, aqui no Conselho de Relações Exteriores, um lugar que reúne a fina flor dessa elite, nós gravamos os comentários do general Wesley Clark, que foi o comandante da OTAN na Guerra de Kosovo. O general discorda em parte da doutrina Bush e faz restrições aos planos de invasão do Iraque. Mas sua análise muito franca mostra qual é o pensamento que hoje comanda a política externa americana.
If you wanted to label it, it is sort of the revenge of the Watergate gang. I mean, all of those who were part of the executive branch, who saw the erosion of executive power, who saw the glorification of investigative reporting, who saw the way that Congress took over prerogatives from the executive branch. Many of those people are in the executive branch again today. And they are energized by what they believe is a national crisis. And they have a chance to redress what they think is a fundamental imbalance in the way the powers, roles, responsibilities, checks, and balances have evolved. And they're moving to do that at this time. And so all the things that Alan has enumerated are there. The civil liberties, the role of the press, the ability to conduct investigations, the militarization of the foreign policy. It's all deja vu. In the late 1960s, the United States Army had a domestic surveillance role. And the job was to provide security around the ROTC detachments. And so young draftees, in some cases volunteers, were sent in with long hair to mingle in the coffee shops and learn the identities of these fomenters of domestic unrest. All that was stopped in the Vietnam and immediate post-Vietnam era. There was a complete separation, and the military was taken away from American life. It's coming back in. I don't think there's a danger in becoming a garrison state, but I do think there's a danger in becoming a much more isolated and imperialistic state. There is a myth or a doctrine that began to circulate in the early 90s that with the demise of the Soviet Union, America had no competitors, no peer competitors, no real challengers abroad, and if we led, managed, and took responsibilities and had the courage to take action in the right way, we would never again face a competitor. First test of that is Iraq. This administration premised much of its national security policy on the need for national missile defense and theater missile defense. The reason? So that we had the freedom of action around the world to help our friends and go after our enemies without being threatened at home. Iraq was in the crosshairs before 9/11. It remains in the crosshairs as a test case. He's been an obstructionist, Saddam Hussein. He's a problem. If we knock him off, others will get the lessons. This is the first chance to roll back the potential proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. It's important because it would preserve our ability to intervene in the Persian Gulf at a later time. And so, far beyond 9/11 and Al-Qaeda, or even the Arab-Israeli problem, is this perception that if America leads the right way, we will remain in perpetuity the hyperpower without challenge. But I think it's a very dangerous notion. Are we ever going to get these people to come and really understand the threat to the United States and understand the historic opportunities that no nation has ever had, at least not since Rome, the opportunity to structure the international environment and take charge of it in a way that protects and advances our interests like this? 9/11 was that opportunity. And that's why in the early days after 9/11, as I circulated through the Pentagon, I remember when people were saying there were no good military options to go after the Al-Qaeda and Taliban. A guy that used to work for me called me and said, sir, can you sit down? I just have to talk to you about something. He said, well, you just have to understand, he said, that nobody has any idea really on how to go after Al-Qaeda and terrorists. If we had, we'd have done it long before, and we don't. But one thing we're good at is we're good at taking down states. And if the only tool you have is a hammer, then you have to make every problem a nail. And so it starts with Iraq, and they've got 6 other states on the list. That's what he said. I've thought about that for a long time, because I think it's not the only explanation for what's going on, but it's part of the mentality that's fed where we are today with respect to Iraq. We need our allies, and they will be there if we work through it. I don't know why we didn't take this through NATO. I wrote a book called Waging Modern War that lays this out in great detail. And I had to, because the lesson of Kosovo has been so misunderstood. The lesson is our allies are there, and strong and effective American leadership can mobilize them. And we don't have to act in the world alone unless we choose to do so. I went through the Pentagon in the right after 9/11, I was called in by a very high-ranking Pentagon official. He said, well, I said, I'd like to ask you how you think the TV coverage has been. He says, no, I want to talk to you about your book. He said, I read it.